Robert Downey Jr.
Comic-Con has been wrapped for about 3 or 4 weeks now, but the news of RDJ, Robert Downey Jr., joining the MCU again, or rejoining the MCU as Dr. Doom, has a lot of people in a chokehold, including this guy. Mostly around the idea of why? Salutations and fist bumps, folks. Welcome back to the grid, okay? And in this video, we have 3 possible situations that we need to talk about on why Marvel Studios went within the direction of casting RDJ as Dr. Doom. And the second one probably is a bit of a stretch, but that's just kind of how my mind works. And if you have a theory or something that we should talk about in detail, go ahead and leave that down in the comments and let's ride. Now, my first theory is that he is playing a completely different character coming back to the MCU as Dr. Doom. And we've seen this kind of thing happen before in the MCU, where Gemma Chan actually played Cersei after playing Minerva inside of Captain Marvel. And on a more recent note, Ralph Ineson is touted as Galactus after playing a Ravager inside of the Guardians. Now, this would work along the idea of actors can play different roles and they're not the particular role that they play as per in real life. And in that same regard, they should be able to play different characters in the same cinematic universe. Because again, a character is a character and the actor who actually steps into that role can be changed. And to be fair, most actors don't really like to be associated all the time with the current role or a role that they've played in the past. Take, for example, Jaleel White and Urkel, because for a very long time, not a whole lot of people could distinguish him from Urkel. And if you saw him in real life, you probably would have called him Urkel instead of his actual name, Jaleel White. And this is possibly the same conclusion that people that don't sit up all night wondering about what the MCU is going to do have come to, because they're not overthinking it like I am. Though, if this is the case, I do get the troubled, concerning thoughts that some of you might be having, because the comparison to Tony Stark in terms of RDJ coming into the MCU after Robert Downey Jr. was literally the face of the MCU for about 10 years as Iron Man does pale in comparison a little bit, so I get it, but that's the closest thing that we've seen in terms of the same person playing 2 roles in the same cinematic universe. But again, I get it. It's Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. They're completely, totally different situations than the other 2. To the point that someone on a recent video on this channel actually made a comment about the fact that it's really hard to talk about the Avengers or anything around the Avengers and not hear anything about Iron Man. And that is super real because I'm a huge Iron Man fan. My second theory, and like I said, this one is a little bit of a stretch, is that he is playing a anchor being inside of the multiverse multiple different times inside of this thing. And this time he shows up as Dr. Doom, or a Tony Stark version of Dr. Doom. So this theory, if you will, is that Robert Downey Jr. is still playing Tony Stark, possibly in a different place, a different world inside of the multiverse, who in this particular situation is considered an anchor being in every place that he shows up. And now, since we've recently introduced anchor beings inside of Deadpool and Wolverine, this is a possible scenario that I feel like needs a lot of unpacking. So let's start with the similarity that inside of the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, Wolverine is technically an anchor being wherever he shows up, whether that be for the good or bad or indifferent. And when I say bad, remember, and spoiler alert for those who need it, if you haven't seen the movie, but spoiler alert for those who need it, remember that inside of the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, this version of Wolverine is considered to be the worst version that is possibly available inside of the multiverse ever because of what he did or did not do inside of his own reality when he left the mansion and humans came to the mansion, destroying the entirety of the X-Men, and he was nowhere to be found. And then when he did come back and see everything that had happened, he felt guilty about it and went on a rampage, killing every human that he possibly could find or round up for vengeance. Though in the end, he does find a redeeming situation with Deadpool, becoming a hero inside of this particular situation at the end, but overall, he's considered to be terrible. So there's a possibility that something similar could happen here, where instead of Tony using Yinsen's death to bring about hope and a future, his heart turns extremely cold after witnessing his friend die in one of the most brutal ways possible. And not only this, inside of the massacre that is happening inside of that cave, he finds out that old Jebediah is behind all of this. And to separate himself from everything, he no longer steps back inside of US soil because he doesn't trust anyone inside of the US, then deciding to hold up in Latveria. Now, stick with me here. RDJ did say inside of Hall H,
new mask, same task.
And if you remember, Tony wanted to build a suit of armor around the world to create peace in our time, which on the sacred timeline, or in Earth 616, is what brought about Ultron, who, by the way, is rumored to be making a reappearance inside of the Vision series. And also, by the way, Doom has his Doombot. So after all that has transpired in the beginning parts of Tony's tenure in the suit, he decides to then take on an alias of Victor Von Doom or Dr. Doom to protect his anonymity, because again, he does not trust anyone inside of the US anymore, and he doesn't want them to find him, while at the same time keeping his face completely hidden while underneath the mask to again protect his anonymity. And my last theory, and this is probably the more obvious one, is when Tony actually became Dr. Doom inside of the comics, which would come from the What If issue, specifically What If Iron Man Demon in an Armor #1. And inside of this issue, Victor tricks Tony to help him build an apparatus that would switch their minds. When their minds are switched, Victor becomes Tony. Tony goes into Victor's mind and completely has his mind wiped so that he doesn't remember anything, but then builds himself up into a doctor, literally becoming a PhD several times over and starting to build his own company, changing his direction as Victor Von Doom, becoming a world-renowned inventor. And Victor, inside of the body of Tony, becomes a power-hungry, villainous man who is only looking out for his bottom line, his company, and, well, himself. But since we will have the Fantastic Four inside of the MCU around this point, there's a possibility that this storyline could be combined with the storyline of infamous Iron Man, where Victor practically takes the Iron Man suit away from Tony and Ben Grimm goes on a manhunt to find him. So with all that said, there's still a whole lot that we could possibly go down this rabbit hole in on why they decided to cast Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom when there were a bunch of different places that they could have gone, and we the fans would have readily went with them as well. But maybe, again, possibly people think that the MCU is slightly creatively bankrupt, or that maybe that they're slightly just bankrupt in general. But we know that Robert Downey Jr. has a bit of a pull on the MCU as a whole. So this is a strategic move from Marvel Studios. But I'd love to know what you guys think about all of this stuff. Leave that down in the comments. And if you want to go down memory lane, once again, go ahead and hit this playlist over here. And if you want to go straight on down everything that needs to be talked about with Deadpool and Wolverine, going into what we're going to see with the mutants and all that kind of stuff, go ahead and hit this playlist right over here. And until next time, y'all be smooth, blurred out.